In this video, we're going to talk about ring sitting and how it can possibly contribute to walking delays. Stay tuned. Ring sitting, what is it? Ring sitting is essentially kind of like butterfly sitting, but you're a little bit more square. So I'm going to show you right now, and if you notice your kiddo doing it, it's not something to be worried about, but I'm going to give you a different strategy that you can implement with your kiddo so that you can avoid walking delays, and also so you kind of understand where I'm coming from as far as how ring sitting can correlate with potential difficulties with walking. I have really tight hips, so it's a little bit tougher for me to sit in this kind of ring sit position. This is like the butterfly position. My knees are up a little bit more. Ring sitting with kiddos is they're a little bit more externally rotated. You might even see kiddos sit kind of like this, where their knees are all the way touching the ground. What you see this mostly is with kiddos who have low tone, and low tone is describing the amount of resting tension in a kiddo's muscles. So some folks have a little bit more high tone, where maybe their muscles are really tight, or they have a diagnosis of cerebral palsy or another neurological condition. Low tone is where it's harder for those kiddos to activate their muscles because they have to spend so much energy producing that energetic requirement in order to fire those muscles, because that resting tension isn't as strong. With a normal amount of resting tension is really middle of the road, where your muscles aren't too tight and your muscles aren't too flexible. You're able to fire your muscles appropriately, not take too much energy, but not take a lot of energy to relax them either. If your kiddo is low tone and they're sitting in ring sit with their knees all the way to the ground, what they're doing in that position is they're kind of resting on the bone-on-bone component. So if they're in full external rotation, they're at their end range of motion, which means that their muscles aren't necessarily the things that are holding their body in that position. It's that joint. So it's kind of that end range where the bone is just kind of resting on the bone, but the muscles don't have to work at all to keep it there. And what's negative about that is that it's more of a relaxed posture and not an active posture. And when kiddos are sitting, we really want them to be activating their trunk. We want them activating their core. We want them activating their glute muscles so that they can then easily transition in and out of sitting and to like crawling to go get a toy, or from sitting into then standing, stand up to move around. But if a kiddo is ring sitting and they're not actively activating those glute muscles, because again, that joint is at end range, then what also happens is they kind of sacral sit too, so their butt kind of gets tucked underneath them, and that isn't a great position to activate the core. They're essentially just kind of hanging on the back of their back joints and kind of their hip ligaments. So ideally, we want them to sit in a more active position. So what I would encourage is to transition a kiddo out from ring sitting, especially if they're delayed in walking, and encourage them to sit in tailor sit or Indian style crisscross applesauce, which helps those hips be in more of a mid-range position than in a kind of full end ring position. So if your kiddo is in ring sit and they're kind of sitting back like this, the more ideal position would be to tuck those feet underneath them, bring their hips into more of a mid-range external rotation position, and have them bring their pelvis from being slouched to sitting upright. And this is going to be a more actively engaged position. You're working on your trunk extensors, but also your abdominal muscles. You're working on activating your glutes, because there's a lot more movement here from side to side than if I'm out here. My movement from side to side is much more limited because my hips are at that end range. Let me kind of show you guys with baby Eric too. So for him, I would try to kind of tuck that ankle underneath And then if he wasn't able to sit in that position, I would get a pillow and just kind of prop it underneath his bottom, and that's going to take some of that external rotation, or kind of this might be too much of a stretch for the kiddo or be too much demand on their hip muscles. So if you elevate their bottom on a scooter or on a pillow, it's going to be less stress on the hips. You can also see this with kiddos who have braces. Sometimes if they have braces, their ankles will be higher. So this, whatever leg is on top of the ankle, will have to rest higher. And so that can be kind of stressful on their hips. So if you have a kiddo who has AFOs on, lift their bottom up, especially if at circle time they're kind of complaining that they don't really like to sit at circle time. Just get their butt higher on a pillow or a little step stool, and they'll be much more comfortable. So again, the biggest issue with ring sitting is that it is a passive position and not an active position. We really want to spend as much time in active sitting positions as we can, because it is going to improve our core strength, improve our glute strength, and work on hip mobility in a more neutral position that we're going to need for walking later on. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you found it helpful. That allows us to have these videos be more visible to physical therapists, students, and parents. Thanks.